This video is brought to you by StoneAgeGamer.com. It's where I go for my gaming accessories, systems, and games. So be sure to check out StoneAgeGamer.com, link in description. How you doing, gamers? This is John with Gamester81.com. This will be part 2 over my review over the RetroN 5 system by Hyperkin. It comes out June 6th, 2014. Now, in the first part, I'll put a link here in the top here corner. In that part, I did an unboxing. I also did an overview over the system itself. In this part 2, I will do the testing part of it. So I'll be testing some games. You can see how compatibility works, what the games actually look like with the HD graphics. And at the very last part of this video, I will share my opinion, personal thoughts about the RetroN 5, the good and the bad. My goal, guys, is to be as unbiased as possible in this review. I'm just going to share my honest opinion and leave it up to you guys if you want to pick up a RetroN 5 or not. So without any further ado, let's continue with this review and let's test out some games. Okay, so here's the main menu. When you boot up the system itself, you have different icons on the left-hand side. Right now I have a Genesis game plugged in, so that's highlighted. You have different options. You can go to settings. You can see the name of the game on the very top there. Let's check out settings. You have image filters. There's several of them, different ones. And they all have very subtle things. And you can turn the scan lines on as well to kind of make it look like a retro. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. You can change the aspect ratio, obviously, screen size, audio. You can do bass boost. You can map the controllers on this as well. So you can map the included controller basically to how you like it. This is another option. You can cheats. Now the cheats are not in the system itself. But rather you have to put on an SD card. There is 1.2 gigs of internal memory, so plenty of storage for save slates. You can do screenshots as well, save them to an SD card. I don't believe you can record games necessarily, but you can do screenshots. Here's an example of an NES game. This is Contra Force, and you can see this is actually pretty good. Pretty bright colors. Now this game initially I don't think was a Contra game itself, but I'm going to show you different settings here as far as filters and stuff. This is Super Eagle. It's kind of what Super Eagle looks like anyway. You can see the sound is pretty good. Really no lag at all. I'd say the controller itself, the directional pad analog, it does, since it's an 8-way analog stick, it does sometimes when you push forward, you kneel accidentally. Here's another filter, and let's check out some other filters. This is all done by hitting the home button of the controller. This is no filter at all. Kind of see it's a little bit more, 8-bit looking, which is cool. This is screen lines, so you can see what it looks like here. It kind of makes it look like, actually it's on like an old standard television, which is cool. So in case you like that look, you can definitely add that as well. Let's go on to move on. This is going to be a Famicom game. This is Wanpaku Duk. This is actually DuckTales on the Famicom. And just check your difficulty here. And it plays, as you can see, it plays pretty well. The only thing I noticed in part 1, as I mentioned before, the cartridge slot does grip quite a bit, so just keep that in mind. But again, the graphics are pretty sharp. I'm really impressed with how well it looks on HDMI. This is 720p output. Here is none right now. That had a filter on it. There's none. Super Eagle, different ones available. This is what it looks. See, it looks a little different, a little more like you would like an 8-bit. So you can see how much the filters make a difference in each game. Moving on to the Genesis. This Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Hyperstone Heist. Great game. This is an exclusive Turtles game for the Genesis, so if you own one, this is definitely a game to check out. I just wanted to show you different abilities. Now you can actually link up to 4 of the RetroN 5 controllers. If you have 3 more, you can actually sync them up just like you would a PS3. Now one thing I want to mention too, when you boot up the game, the system, you have to hold down the power button for 5 seconds, which is weird. Kind of an annoyance. And you can't power on the system or turn off through the controller itself like you would like a PS3, PS4 remote, or even Xbox remote. This is obviously based on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon. Okay, so here's another, you can do save slates here as well. Here's filters. This is super. Sharpens out. It does kind of, the colors do kind of bleach out just subtly. Not a huge deal to me, but I did notice that in case you guys are noticing that as well. I want to point that out. Here's another one. Overall, the sound quality is really good as well. And here's another example of a filter to kind of show you. Let's go and turn on the scan lines. You can see what it looks like as it would like on a normal standard television. Actually, I think that's a really cool feature on the RetroN 5, for sure. These Mauser droids, I think that's what they're called. They're kind of annoying, but really good beat 'em up game. If you guys are a big fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade, this is definitely one to check out for the Genesis. Let's go on and move on to another example of a game real quick. Move on to the Super Nintendo. Go on to Yoshi's Island. It's a great game, another must-own for the platform. Look how bright the colors look on this. I mean, looks really, really sharp. The sound is good. I'm very, very impressed by how the Super Nintendo looks on the RetroN 5. I tested out a lot of other games. I didn't have any issues with reading my games other than Super Metroid, which I'll talk about a little later in my recap on this video. I think it's just perhaps my own cart. Here is the Sega Master System. Now you need a power-based converter in order to play this, but it plugs into the Genesis slot, and you're able to play Sega Master System games. This is Mickey Mouse, Castle of Illusion. Now the reason I keep dying here is because I'm figuring out what buttons to push on the controller, because the mapping is off. But you can adjust the mapping on the controller. You can customize that, which does help. And of course you can use a standard controller as well. In the 8-pin port. Here is Game Boy Advance. This is the F-Zero for Game Boy Advance. Again, really sharp colors, pretty sharp images. Trying to figure out the button layout because every system's a little bit different and the controller is kind of unique in design. But this is a great F-Zero game. If you're a big fan of the ones for the Super Nintendo, definitely check out this F-Zero port. So I didn't have any issues with any of my Game Boy Advance games. I love playing my Game Boy Advance on my TV. Up until now, I've been playing on my Game Boy Advance adapter on the GameCube. This is Game Boy. We're going to check out Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins. Check out different filters. This is no filter at all. As you can see, it's a little you can see the 8-bit, definitely, whatever. This is a little sharper, takes away the block images. This is another fun Mario game, and this is one of the few Mario games where you collect coins, you actually don't get 1-ups, you don't get level ups on this game, so a little bit different than your standard Mario game for sure. I'm going to move on to another port. This is going to be the Super Famicom. This last example I'll show you, Final Fantasy 6, I believe, no, maybe 5, no, this is 5, and this is for the Super Famicom, and I picked this one out because of music. Square always has great music in their games back at Super Nintendo, and this one certainly is no exception to the rule. This is awesome music. So this is kind of an example of some ports. You can see the quality. I'm going to show you some comparisons to RetroN 5 to the actual system itself. Well, guys, I've done an unboxing, I've talked about the system, the overview, what it can do, and now I want to share with you my personal thoughts about the RetroN 5. We'll start with a positive, okay, about the RetroN 5. First off, if you break it down as far as cost, a lot of people complain that, well, initially it was $100 and then Hyperkin raised it 40% to $140. Now it's a big jump. I understand that, and $140 certainly is a lot of money, but let's break it down per system and consider what you get, because you definitely get more than just 5 systems here. You get the NES, you get the Famicom, you get the Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, Genesis, Mega Drive, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, and Game Boy Color. You got 9. If you have a power base converter, you can actually play Sega Master System's games as well, as I demonstrated. Now, if you break it down per cost, and I'm not going to include the Sega Master System because you have to purchase the power base converter separately. So if you just break it down for cost, I'll be a little conservative as far as pricing goes, but an average NES loose probably sells around 40 bucks. Famicom 20, Super Nintendo 35, Super Famicom 35, Genesis 30, Mega Drive 35, Game Boy 20, Game Boy Color 30, and Game Boy Advance 40. Now these may be different prices in your area, but those are kind of what they go for where I live. Now if you break that down, total those costs, the total cost to buy them all separately would probably be, it'd be closer to around $285 to $300. So you consider what you get. Not only that, you get the convenience of all-in-one encompassing system, so you don't have to have all these systems, displayed or ready to go. You have everything conveniently in one system as itself. I really also like the opportunity that you can save games. Now, if you have a game that maybe the battery has died or whatever, it's getting to that point where a lot of these batteries or in carts are dying, you can actually save the game into the internal 1.2 gig hard drive, which is really convenient. And I've noticed when you play a game and say you pause, you come back, you put another game in, you go back to the other game, actually saves that slot automatically, that place where you're playing, which is nice. So it's a huge feature, really important feature, definitely taken from emulators, right? You can kind of save emulators at any point in the game. They've done that and applied that to the RetroN 5. So now I do like the fact that there are opportunities to have cheats, applied cheats, kind of like Game Genie. Now these cheats aren't in the actual system itself. You have to use an SD card and download them, which currently, as I'm doing this video, they're not available, so I can't really show you that, but I'm sure Hyperkin will make those available soon, so that's cool. So I'm not much for cheats, but they're always nice to have when you need them. HD graphics, surprisingly, the HD graphics are pretty good. I really like the filters that they've applied. I like the lines that they've added, kind of make it old school. I can't really tell too much of a difference between the other filters, to be honest with you, but it does look good. I mean, for the most part, the graphics look good and definitely surprised me with the HD graphics. Now, along with that, the audio, I must say, is definitely better. You got the HDMI cable, the connection, the audio is crisper. When you play on older consoles, especially consoles like the NES that use RF, and I know that NES has AV as well, but let's face it, growing up, we used the RF, right? And those, you'd hear crackle and stuff like in the audio. With HDMI, you don't get any of that. Firmware updates. Now, this is probably the biggest thing I think is really important to consider about the system, because say there's something wrong with the games, or the games don't work, or there's no compatibility. I don't have every game in the library, so I'm unable to determine if every game works, unfortunately, but I have tested all the games I have, and I didn't really have any issues other than one, which I'll get to in a second. But if there is an issue, then there is a firmware update along with that. So they'll make a patch, you put it on an SD card, you put it into the system itself, and you're good to go, and that's fixed. So that's nice that they've given that ability to fix the problem rather than to have to worry about buying a system that may not work with your particular game. Internal storage, I mentioned this before, I think this is really cool, 1.2 gigs, plenty of space to do screenshots, which is cool, save slates, all that good stuff. I like the fact the controller ports, I prefer using a normal controller for the system, and the controller ports on both sides of the system. And that's nice to have that ability to use the controllers. Now, the controller will only work on that particular system that it's made for. For example, the Super Nintendo controller will only work for Super Nintendo games. You can't use it for NES games or Genesis games. You have to use it for Super Nintendo games. But that's kind of a bummer. I think it would have been cool to kind of use controllers and map the controllers to work on any system, but it is what it is. Now I want to mention the cons about the system, things that I don't necessarily care for. And I just want to point out and bring to your attention that I have noticed. Okay, first one is the power button. You have to hold it down for 5 seconds to boot up the system. It took me a while to figure that out. Not too long, but usually I'm used to kind of pushing it and starting. I figured you'd have to hold it, and you can't start the system through the remote. Unlike a PS3 or Xbox, whatever, the wireless remote, the home button, you can just push it, power button, it boots up the system. It's been convenient. You can't do that on the system. So that's something minor, but definitely something that I wanted to point out. Another thing I want to point out, it's not a huge deal to me, but I know some people will make an issue out of it, is some people will consider this kind of emulation system an emulator. Essentially, it does kind of dump partial ROM onto the system itself. It doesn't dump the whole ROM, but partial of the ROM, right? If that makes sense. So it is, in a sense, kind of emulating the ROM. It's not using the exact hardware that the games are intended for. So some people who are purists, who like playing the actual system itself, you're probably better off sticking with the system itself, unless you don't mind. I don't think it's a huge deal, personally. It's not really messing up the cart in any way or system, but some people are purists and they want to play the actual game on the actual hardware where it's intended. That's not the case. It is kind of an emulator to a point. I had some issues with Super Metroid. That's one game particularly I had issues because I plugged it in and it read unknown cart. So when you plug in a game, it takes a couple seconds to load and read the cart. It had unknown cart, and I'd cleaned it, whatever, and it still said unknown cart, which is odd because it's Super Metroid, pretty common game, right? So there's an option to play the game anyway, which I did, and it did read the game, which is fine. It played well, but I lost all my save storage on that cart, or actually didn't port to the system. So all the save data I had with the save files, it didn't carry over to the system. So I just want to let you guys know that did happen to me. I'm not sure if that usually happens with most Super Metroids. I don't know. I have a pretty clean cart, at least I would think so anyway. I keep them in a nice clean place. I don't, they're not too dirty, but that's something that did occur to me, and I just want you guys to know about it. Along with that line, the cart, when the slot itself is tight, and when I've noticed it grabs, and a lot of people don't like the grip. I think they do that just to keep the carts in there, but I don't think it necessarily ruins the carts, but it is kind of annoying, the fact that the carts are in there so tight. And that can be an issue for some people. You can't put multiple games in the system at once. And at first I tried putting a Super Nintendo game, a Nintendo game, and I wanted to see all the games line up in the system. I thought it would have been convenient to just kind of switch whatever system I want to play while the system's on, and I almost crashed it. So there's a big warning thing in the instruction manual saying you can't do that. You could jeopardize crashing your system. I didn't in my case, so I'm fortunate. So I don't recommend doing that, but it would have been convenient to have all the systems there one time. It doesn't play any flash cards. Kind of disappointed by that. I have a number of flash cards. I have one for the Genesis, Super Nintendo, whatever. There's a lot for the NES as well, where basically you put a card in with an SD card and it won't read. It doesn't even detect the card itself. So you're unable to play any flash cards. Along those lines, you put an SD card with a whole bunch of ROMs in it for the Genesis as an example. I put it into the system. You can actually go to the file menu and see what's on the SD card. Usually when I did that, none of the ROMs showed up. So you cannot use this as an emulator, although it does dump some of the ROM, like I mentioned before, onto this hard drive. You cannot use that as an emulator. So just want to let you guys know, I tried it, it didn't work. It's very sensitive to dirty carts. I've noticed that. So if cart is a little bit dirty, I know they say not to blow on carts, but I always did when I was young, and it didn't seem to have, hurt the carts at all. They still work and play. But it didn't work. It eventually reads the games, but you got to make sure the games are super clean when you're plugging in. It's a lot more sensitive than a normal system would be as far as reading the carts. So be sure that when you do plug in a cart, that it's clean and it's readable for the RetroN 5. Overall, guys, that's my pros, my cons, good and bad about the RetroN 5. I think if I were to give it an overall grading scale to 10, one being terrible, 10 being freaking awesome, I'd probably give it like a 7.5 to 8 at this point. I think with some firmware updates, I think that will work. There's one last thing I do want to mention, and that is the controller, though. I almost forgot to talk about the controller. I give Hyperkin props for creating something unique and different design. And you can map the controller to fit, better for what you want to do, and that's cool. You have that ability. But I didn't like the analog stick. Most retro games are 4-directional, left, right, up, down. And when you have an 8-directional analog stick, there's points in the game where like you're trying to go forward and you're ducking, and you have to be they're kind of sensitive. Buttons feel fine, that's cool, but yeah, and I do like the fact there is like a rechargeable lithium battery in it, which is nice, and that you can plug it in through a mini USB, very similar to what you do like on a PS3, PS4, which is cool, and I'm sure they took that from the handbook there. But yeah, I mean, the controller itself, you can definitely do without. The fact that you can use normal controllers and the side ports is huge, and definitely saves this game in that regard. Well, guys, that concludes my pros and cons, good and bad, about the RetroN 5. I'm curious what you guys think. I'm curious if you guys plan on getting one. I do have, a wish list, so to speak. I'd wish for Hyperkin, and that is, they're always evolving systems, right? So the next one, I'm sure, will have other consoles. And I believe, I might be wrong here, but I believe after 20 years, a patent usually expires. So that's why they're able to make these clone consoles. And next year, 2015, actually happens to be the 20th anniversary of the N64. So maybe we'll see the N64 clone. That'd be awesome. I'd love to see some more love to the TurboGrafx 16. I think it's a super underrated system. I understand a lot of games aren't floating around there. It's probably a little harder to collect for, but I know there's a lot of fans out there for it. And I think if you introduce a clone system for the TurboGrafx 16, I think a lot of people would be more interested in finding games, because they are out there for sure. But that's my wish list before I go. And I'm curious what your guys' wish list is. Please let me know what you guys think about the RetroN 5. If you guys plan on getting one. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys want to stay in touch, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm on Twitch TV as well. And of course, you can follow me on Gamester81.com, where I post exclusive content as well. Put links to all those below. I appreciate you guys subscribing. We'll see you guys soon. Happy gaming. Take care.